Right, so we're up to the Guardian set of cards for our Super Slam set review, and I gotta say, Guardian is quite intriguing, this set, because it seems like a pretty good attempt at redefining certain mechanics, advancing certain mechanics without bloating the class, right? So if we think of Mechanologist and the attempt over and over again to build items, to build a core set of items, it gets all a bit bloaty, whereas this does seem fairly interesting because one of the big issues with, say, the setup dynamic for Guardian is when it comes to your payoff, you have too many hoops to jump through, right? So even if you go down the route of setting up Seismic Surge, you want your buffs, your Seismic Surge, to then play your attack. Versus this now, where we have a good chunk of setup, we have the Auras of Suspense now, and then we also have small Guardian attacks that benefit from these Guardian-only buffs. So I think this is probably a great example of being able to give the class something within its identity that does also still synergize with what they already had access to. So, starting off, we have Pleiades Superstar, right? So, our Aura of Suspense main hero, although Aura of Suspense, again, is going to be a Guardian mechanic across the board. So, as Pleiades, instant tap, remove a Suspense counter from an Aura you control. You may put a Suspense counter on a Aura of Suspense that you control. So, essentially, you get to either speed up or slow down your Auras of Suspense. And we also have a pretty cool common set of static Auras of Suspense that are sort of your maintained buff cards in terms of building a board state for Guardian, right? Because Guardian's sort of in the middle ground where you're building a offensive board state, but not a board state with a whole bunch of interaction. Sure, you'll try and protect the auras, but they're mainly there to help with your attacks, which is definitely really, really cool. And then, of course, as her cheer trigger, you get to create a confidence token, which is your in-between between, you know, dominate and your normal attacks or overpower, for instance, right? So it offers some level of attack protection, but it doesn't quite play around the new cohort of blocks that we're also getting, right? Since blocking with block cards, the actual type, seems to be the big direction that the game is currently heading in. Then for Lyath Goldmane, our 5 intellect hero. So the base power and block of cards you control are halved, rounded up, right? So a 5 becomes a 3, halve it, 2.5, rounded up to 3. Instant, pay 2 to tap, the crowd boos you, and then defending action cards. So specifically action cards you control, get +1 this turn, and then whenever the crowd boos you, you get to create a might token. So essentially, you pay 2, you get to return your 3 blocks back to 3 block if they're action cards, and you also get to generate a might token for your following turn, which is definitely really nice. Having the on-demand boo in probably the easier fashion than, say, Tough Nut is definitely really, really solid. So the question is, how far does that extra card get you? And I gotta say, it's going to get you a lot, right? Because there are so many things that having one extra card in hand consistently every single turn is definitely going to open up in terms of setting up, blocking out, and of course building a really egregious turn. Alright, starting off with equipment. So again, we have our sort of limited set, building off of the design scope of the heavy hitter pieces, kind of, right? So we have Plate of Tough Love from our Revered Guardian equipment. If you control a Confidence and Toughness token, this gets +2. And Blade Break, when the combat chain closes, this gets destroyed, right? So it offers 3 block overall, as long as you do have your Confidence or Toughness. But if you don't, you can still utilize it to block 1, right? Strong Stomach of Adversity, you have to control a Confidence and Might token, and then you get its +2. Then, for the legendary, we have Ironfist Revelation. When this defends, you may turn a face-down card with Crush in your arsenal face-up. If you do, put a +1 counter on it, and Temper 2. So, a lot of us were hoping for boots, but this is still kind of okay, right? Yeah, we'll go with okay. It doesn't sort of mesh super well with every single Guardian. It probably works best with Bravo, but it may have some applicable use across the board. So the issue here is that you have to have a face-down card, and it has to have Crush in order for you to get a +1 counter off of these gauntlets. So for instance, with Heave, no good, you're turning card face up. Defense reaction, no good, it doesn't have Crush. So I kind of would have liked if this was a face-down Guardian attack action card in your arsenal, but still, again, has that synergy with old Bravo, which is also kind of interesting, because if old Bravo goes, I'd assume that the new Bravo that we have for the Welcome deck, we just get as an adult, and his hero ability ends up flipping the card in your arsenal face up, therefore competing with your Ironfist Revelation, granted at a cost, whereas the new Legendary Gauntlets, block, get a counter, right? Which is still pretty nice, right? You get 2 blocks out of this, and potentially +2, which, you know, as we've seen with Apex Bonebreaker, is definitely pretty solid for the arm slot. Then, as our just Guardian legs, we have Stand Strong. Action, pay 3, destroy this, create a Confidence token. Activate this only if you control a Aura of Suspense. Go again. So, I kind of wish this had Battle Worn just to make it a bit more comparable. So, we have Great Block. Well, we have Great Block in the sense of no, Legendary, by way of Civic Steps being a 3-block card. And then we have more functional stuff like Crater Hoof, or what we're getting in the Pleiades Armory deck that offers a decent amount of block and a functional effect. So in the sake of Crater Hoof, you can still block with it, has Battle Worn, and then you can use it to give your next Guardian attack action card from your arsenal, Dominate, which, does kind of pair with the Gauntlets, in a sense. So in the case of Stand Strong, it's either block, or you get to pay 3 for a confidence token, which, while somewhat comparable to Dominate, right, because it blocks out a different set of cards, is also then restricted by the fact that you have to control of Aura Suspense, so they can be a little bit awkward, I feel, and they could have sort of opened it up a little bit more to make it have some level of applicable use, but again, they're our limited common legs, so what can you expect? Right, our first card for Revered Guardian, Cries of Encore. When this attacks a hero, if you have less life than them, the crowd cheers you. If you've been cheered this turn, when this hits a hero, you may play an Aura of Suspense from your graveyard this turn, which is definitely really, really nice to put something back into play. Now, you do have to pay the cost of the Aura of Suspense, but there is going to be a great number of targets that this can possibly hit, as we'll see coming up throughout the list. So it is definitely a really nice payoff attack that then can help lead into your next turn. Thespian Charm, choose any number, destroy Might or Vigor token, crowd cheers you, and return an Aura permanent you control to its owner's hand, which is definitely really, really nice because you get to bounce an Aura to either protect it from destruction effects, or then to be able to replay it to try and re-trigger its effect, or just get yourself another counter through Pleiades' ability to shift to a different Aura of Suspense. Up on a pedestal as our first Aura of Suspense for Revered Guardian, so 0 cost, and this does feature our sort of new mechanic-esque, right, or design principle, I should say, for Guardian, which is instant auras that also block, right? So it's a 2-block instant aura, and when this enters or leaves the arena, you may put a Revered or Guardian attack action card from your graveyard on top of your deck. So a nice little tutor effect, and it does trigger twice, right, when you play it, and then eventually once it loses all its counters. So you're able to set up your next turn, and then probably the turn following that, if again you use Pleiades' ability to remove a counter and speed it up slightly. So it's definitely a really nice effect with the option to then be able to pitch or slightly block out, right, as an instant. Then we have Turning Point as Revered Guardian block. When this defends, if you have less life than the attacking hero, the crowd cheers you. While this is defending, if you've been cheered this turn, it gets +3. So in a sense, it's on-rate block, right, being a blue 2 block card, but you can get it up to a 5 block if you've been cheered, making it an above-rate block, which definitely seems really, really solid considering, the Super Saiyan heroes are going to be amply triggering cheers and boos for a lot of their other cards and effects. Uplifting Performance, so again, this is our set of if you control X token, gets a +1, and then if it hits, you get both tokens. So for Pleiades, we have Control Confidence or Toughness to get its +1, and then when it hits, you get to create a Confidence and Toughness token. So, it's a solid enough attack. Again, the tokens can go a long way, setting up Confidence for your next turn, as well as then having the extra little bit of defense for your opponent's turn is definitely solid enough, right? Then for Lyath, right? Now this Aura of Suspense is definitely quite the card, right? Leave them hanging. So a 3-cost red, again, instant aura with 3 block. Suspense, 2 counters, but as Lyath, you don't have the easy access to speed up or slow down these auras. But when this enters the arena, intimidate the target hero. So it is a instant intimidate. Now it will cost you 2 cards, right? You have to pitch into it, but still that can be very disruptive to play on your opponent's turn when they give you a priority window. And then when this leaves the arena, the next attack this turn gets +4. So it's a solid enough buff. And I think because of the Intimidate proc, it's definitely worth its value. That Intimidate proc can either be on your turn to help get something else across, or again, most likely, some level of disruption on your opponent's turn to slow down their play. Then we have 2 steps ahead. At the start of your turn, destroy this, then create a Confidence and 3 Might tokens as a normal aura, no go again, and a blue 3 block. So this card essentially lets you create a stack of tokens for other effects, and then for the turn after that, Confidence for some level of attack protection, and of course the +3 from the Might token. So the fact that it gets you tokens on board, 2 of different names, is definitely nice, right? That's going to synergize with a few of the different cards we've already looked at. And then again, a +3 and Confidence is definitely nice, but it can be a little bit awkward not having go again, right? Being something a little bit more tricky to set up, maybe played in conjunction with some other auras, all trying to ramp up for that big second turn once everything does trigger. Then we have Liar's Charm, choose a number, steal a Toughness or Vigor, crowd boos you, and target hero loses and can't gain abilities this action phase unless they discard a card, meaning you can turn off your own ability, right? So you get the boo, you get your might, and then you turn off your halving mechanic for your attacks or your blocks, which is definitely really, really solid because it can be used in a few different ways, right? When you need that little extra oomph on a defending turn, or as sort of a attack reaction to reset the power of the cards that you're actually presenting, right? So instead of being halved, they jump back up, which can definitely be nice if you're working with something really big, although it does seem like Lyath will kind of favor smaller cards that do just excel at being buffed, and therefore not having to worry about his halving mechanic. Truth or Trickery, a Reviled Guardian block. When this defends, you may look at the top card of your deck and choose a color. If you do, the attacking hero guesses if it's that color, and if they guess wrong, they have to discard a card. So, again, valid options for this: Pearl, I'm pretty sure that's the term for non-color, red, yellow, and of course blue. If you pick any other color, all your opponent has to say is wrong because it will be wrong, and then they'll be right, and they don't have to discard a card. So, the fact that this is still a nice on-rate block with upside is really, really good. And there is definitely enough going on with how Lyath wants to play that you'll have a fair mix of colors to try and trick your opponent. And then lastly, for our Reviled Guardian cards, we have Spew Obscenities. So, control a Confidence or Might, this gets +1, and when it hits, you get to create a Confidence and Might token, and it is a 0/3, right? So with Lyath, it will be a 0/2, but then you can get its +1, or of course buff it through some other means. So it is a small enough card with a decent effect that Lyath will probably like it, right? To get his extra confidence and his might tokens to then set up his next turn. Okay, so then on to the Guardian stuff, right? And there will be quite the handful of Suspense auras, starting off with In the Palm of Your Hand, and boy, do I like this card. So, when this enters or leaves the arena, draw a card, right? So when you play it, you get to draw a card, and when it finally leaves, be it through destruction or its Suspense trigger, you get to draw a card. Be it through bouncing it back with, for instance, the Thespian Charm, its destruction from your opponent, or it's just triggering of its Suspense effect, you get to draw another card, meaning it is essentially worth its resource to play, right? Because it is a red card in hand. It's costing you 2 to play, so if you spend a blue, you're floating 1 resource, and you're getting a card back, right? So, yeah, it is a card that essentially just leads to profit, right? You will eventually get that extra card, and you will be better for it, so to speak, right? So, yeah, I think in almost every Guardian, this can probably see play. It's also an instant, and it has 3 blocks. So it doesn't even have the usual detriment that an instant card does have, right? So it's flexible enough, can help you try and find something a little bit better, feed your resource to feed into something else, and then as Pleiades, set up your next turn for an extra draw, or as everyone else, 2-turn delay for an extra card, right? Now, we have a new set of tower cards, right? So these are all small tower cards, and tower is a keyword that says if this has 13 or more, it gets X effect. So for no tall tales, we have when this hits a hero, cards they own lose and can't gain go again during their next action phase. So very similar to Spinal Crush, right? But now on tower instead of crush. It also has if this has greater power than its base, it gets +1, meaning that all you have to do to get its tower effect to be active is to give it a +9, or essentially 3 0-cost buff cards, right? So in that sense, it's definitely achievable as both Lyath or any other Guardian. And again, why I think these cards are a little bit better in support of the whole setup play of Guardian, they allow you to block out and then still present a very powerful turn. So you spend your turn setting up your big buffs, your auras to proc, and then for your opponent's turn, you have a card like this and all your other cards, and you're happily able to give them all of your other cards to block, because this is now such a low-cost card to play. Unlike some of the other tower effects where, again, you need a little of buff, sure, but then you also have to maintain a certain number of cards to still be able to play that big attack, right? So, yeah, small tower, big reward, and also, overall, I do think tower is going to be easier to land, right? Crush leaves that threshold to block through, whereas tower, if any of the damage gets through and is a significant amount of damage, then its effect will trigger. Now, our other tower cards, cut a long story short, tower, 13 or more, when this hits a hero, they discard their hand, their entire hand, right? So it's basically a give all your cards moment regardless, right? Because it will obviously warrant a whole lot of blocking if it has 13 or more power anyway. Cut off the knees, tower, when this hits a hero, destroy the top 3 cards of their deck. So a little bit of mill in the same sort of vein as Righteous Cleansing, although Righteous Cleansing can be a little bit better, right, because of all the other merits that go into its effect. So it's still solid enough. Again, it's still something that you can utilize in definitely a fatigue setting, right, where you have more access to, again, set up, block out, present something small that then is something big, right? And lastly, cut the small talk. When this hits a hero, destroy all auras they control, be it token or not, right? So yeah, a whole board clear is definitely really, really nice, especially when we're in a set with a whole lot of aura generation, both again through aura cards and the whole heap of token generation. Now, back to auras of Suspense, we have Hungry for More. So Suspense aura, again, they all enter with the same amount of counters. 2, start your turn, remove 1 Suspense counter, and then when it has none, it gets destroyed. When this leaves the arena, you get to gain 3 life. So it's a 1-cost card to eventually gain 3 life, but I think the main crux of most of these for instance, Pleiades, is the fact that they feed a counter into some of your other auras, which is definitely really, really nice, again, to help control their timing. So as Pleiades, you play this, it's a little behind on rate in terms of the life gain, but you also get that counter to prolong something else, which can definitely be very, very good once we get to the final set of, mind you, common Suspense auras. Full of Bravado, when this attacks or defend, if you control an Aura of Suspense, you get to create a confidence token. So then, even with the limited stat line of 2 block, it's still a fairly enough easy way to access confidence, and it seems like just continuously being able to proc confidence is definitely going to be really strong in Pleiades. Story Beat, when this attacks or defend, you may put a suspense counter on or remove one from an Aura of Suspense you control. Now again, even though these cards have that 2 block, right, the fact that you have the flexibility to attack with it or defend with it to trigger its effect is definitely really nice. Now with Story Beat, it's an either or, not an either and, right? So it's either remove a counter or put a counter on a different Aura of Suspense, which again can definitely be useful, right? There are auras that you want to trigger early. Power Play, if this was played from Arsenal, it gets +5, so it's a 3 for essentially 8, again, if it is played from Arsenal. So it has a small base for life, which is definitely really nice. And then again, it's slightly above rate for everyone else, as long as it is played from Arsenal. So it's still, somewhat of a solid common. Now, shoot your mouth off. So it does seem like they are continuing the trend of these swing big effects, right? So when the combat chain closes, if this didn't hit, the defending hero creates a confidence token. So again, it's a slightly above rate attack, but definitely not as good as swing big, and it's held back by, again, that unfortunate pesky 2 block. Now, we do also have a cohort of small crush cards, right? So short Shrift is our first one, a 0-cost crush card. If this has greater than its base, it gets +1. So again, similar to our tower effects. And then Crush, when this deals 4 more damage to a hero, they discard a card. So that is still a decent level of disruption. Granted, again, you will have to make this somewhat big, give it some level of attack protection in order to get its 4 damage across in order to actually trigger its effect. But again, we're moving to a state of being able to set up a whole bunch of buffs, then comfortably block out, and present something like this, where it does have a decent enough disruptive effect. Now, we have a small problem. So its crush effect is you get to destroy an aura they control, right? So again, not as good as Tower, and it's kind of interesting that these weren't reversed, right? And the Tower effects were the singular effect, and then the Crush, because they're a bit harder to land, were the big effects, but still, again, somewhat nice, right? Aura Disruption is definitely a mechanic we need more of across the board, so this will have some utility, again, in decks that are setting up a whole bunch of buffs. Then lastly, for the Crush cards, Wrecking Ball, when this deals 4 or more damage to a hero, destroy a card in their arsenal. So again, more Arsenal disruption, right? There is a good chunk of it in this set for both Guardian and Brute, so that is definitely nice to see. Alright, back to the last set of our Suspense auras. So, we have Dramatic Pause. When this enters the arena, target defending action card gets +3 this chain link, right? So it's essentially worth its block value in the sense that you're giving something +3. Then is a suspense counter for some of those other cards that you want to trigger, right? Move counters around. But more importantly, it is a counter for Pleiades, which is definitely really, really nice. So again, fair value plus a counter. Now, Act of Glory. So we have a whole bunch of 2-turn buffs, right? So Act of Glory, a 4-cost. When this leaves the arena, your next attack this turn gets +6. Now, these are nice in the fact that they are the next attack this turn, rather than next Guardian attack or next Guardian attack action card. But is it worth its +6? So it's the question of how to value 2-turn stacking, right? The ability to take that whole extra turn in setting up a bunch of stacked buffs to really make something big and offensive. So this is a +6 for a 4-cost, but again, it has that 2-turn delay. We also have Edge of Their Seats, which is a 3-cost for a +5. So again, follows the same scheme. Each of these drop down a cost and therefore drop down a power. Now, in comparison to our normal buffing cards, a 0-cost is usually worth +3, 1 a +4, 2 a +5. So this is 1 cost higher with the utility that is, again, delayed by that extra turn, right? Allowing you to effectively stack up multiples of them for a bigger compounding effect. Then lastly, we have Tension in the Air as a 2-cost for 4. So the question is, again, how much should 2 turns later be worth, right? If we look at cards that usually generate, for instance, Might, they usually have an extra +1 thrown in because, again, you're taking that turn of delay. So in essence, it does make these cards underrate with the exception of Pleiades, right, who gets the counter usage out of them. But again, at the benefit of maybe being able to take one of these Aura Suspense and combo it with a different static Guardian Aura buff to then have a much bigger 3rd turn overall to, again, land some of those really impactful effects. Now, lastly, we have a set of 3 static Suspense auras. So while they're in the arena, their effects trigger. So we have the Suspense is killing me. Your first attack each turn gets +1. Again, starts off with 2 Suspense counters, but is definitely something you want to maintain as Pleiades, or try and figure out some way to get an extra counter onto it as everyone else, right? So it's a nice, essentially on-rate static buff that can definitely offer a lot of value over the course of a game. So this gives your first attack each turn +1, so you can play it at the start of your turn and still benefit from its first proc, right? Because you haven't attacked yet, which is definitely nice. And then again, it's kind of already on rate as a blue buff, but then once it sticks around for 1 extra turn, it's now worth 2. 3 turns. If you can use Pleiades or some other effect to give it an extra counter, then it's worth 3. So all of these 3 following cards definitely make up the bread and butter of Suspense auras. So, to be continued is the next one. The first time you'd be dealt damage each turn, prevent 1 of that damage. So, to me, this is definitely a little bit stronger, right? Because it is the first time each turn you're dealt damage. So, it's prevention on your turn and prevention on your opponent's turn, which is definitely really nice. So, straight away, just from playing this, it can be worth 2 prevention. Overall, through its own suspense counters, it's worth 4. And then any way to upkeep it and maintain it, it's worth more than that. So, again, they are really strong common cards. And lastly, we have what happens next. The first card with cost 1 or more you play each turn costs 1 less to play. So it's the first card and each turn. So again, it works on your turn and your opponent's turn for the sake of, say, defense reactions, right? So it does have the little hiccup of with cost 1 or more. So for instance, it doesn't negate something like Frostwise on a card that is a 0 cost, but it can definitely help with those big defense reactions, or again, just what you're normally doing as Guardian, because it's that next step up from Seismic Surge, right? It affects everything you're most likely thinking to play. And again, the longer you can maintain it, the more value you're getting out of it. So these static suspense auras are pretty nuts, and they also come as cold foil extended art. So it's kind of weird, but I hope they're somewhat common because they will definitely be a great card to find in a box, right? So overall, that's the Guardian cards. Again, it offers a whole bunch of new support, all within the same vein of Guardian. Again, we have our crush effects, we have our tower effects, but they're on smaller, easier to use cards that help with the flow of what you're trying to do. Again, being able to take a setup turn, still block out, and then still present them, even if your hand's a little bit disrupted, because they're the only card you need to maintain going into your turn, which is definitely really nice. And then, of course, we have our new Auras of Suspense, which will see use not just in Pleiades, but across the board, and definitely come with some pretty cool effects. So, what do you think of Guardian? What do you think of the Auras of Suspense? Right, overall, I'm still a little bit jaded because they are definitely a cool mechanic that would fit Bard, right? And just controlling the rhythm of the game. But you know what? I'm on a Guardian kick, so I'm going to enjoy them nonetheless. Hope you enjoyed. See ya.